Does Utah have one of the best offensive lines in the country? And Devon Dampier not a top 20 quarterback according to a major college football site? We're talking about it all on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. It's your first time tuning into the show. Make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. My name is JT Wistrcill, the host of the show. Excited to be joined by Bryan Brown, one of the top football minds in the state of Utah, and we're breaking down, we're talking ball. That's what we're doing this entire show, offensive side of the ball. We did it on yesterday's show, Phil Steele rankings, reacting to them. How should the fans feel? How should the media feel about this ranking? How do we feel about this rankings? We're diving into it all, and at the end, a really important conversation on high school football coaches and just high school coaches in general needing to be compensated more and just given what they deserve for the hour, energy, and effort they put in. Bryan, your one word to sum up our conversations we've had today?
Dynamite.
I love it. See if you agree in the comments below. Bryan Brown back with me here. We did part 1 yesterday, part 2 today, talking about Phil Steele's positional rankings. We covered the defense. Now it's time to dive headfirst into the offensive rankings. How does Phil Steele, how these rankings work if you didn't see yesterday's show? Phil Steele ranks every position group on every team in the country. So if Oregon has the best offensive line, and then the second is this, the second is that, and wherever Utah ends up, like that's what he does. And we're going to talk and rank and react to each of those as well and give our interpretation on how we feel fans will feel about it, the media will feel about it, and also just how we feel about it as well, too. So let's start with the one that is always drawing all the headlines. It's quarterbacks. He ranked Devon Dampier, and I guess this is technically, also if you guys want to see where Utah ranked, you can get the magazine, Phil Steele, as well as Josh Furlong did post each of the rankings online, just not the explanation, obviously. But the quarterbacks are 23rd. So that's interesting. If you're doing the quarterback room, I'm good with that. Also, still, like we're sitting here in June 11th. I still don't even know exactly what Nate Johnson is going to be in this offense. Is he going to be a quarterback gadget guy? Is he going to be a receiver? What are they going to do with him? But anyways, just like for how I feel about Utah's quarterback room, if you're doing it as a whole, I think I get this ranking. I think this, I will just say, how do I feel about it? I think Devon Dampier should be in the top 20. And some people have had him as high as a top 10 quarterback in college football. It might be a little too high for me right now. I think I'd probably have him top 15 personally, but I think fans will probably feel like it's too low. And I don't know, maybe I think media will probably say this is fair just because he is making the P4 jump up. But as I said, for me personally, I'm really confident in Devon Dampier. I think he's going to have a really strong season. I think this quarterback room overall should be in the top 20 because if everything goes to plan, which is what you're ranking this on mostly to me, it's Dampier on the field. And that to me, yes, backup quarterbacks, we got some questions, but Dampier is so good to this point that I feel like this group deserves a top 20 ranking.
I agree. And I think a lot of it is the weightiness of Devon Dampier. I think for people who don't, I still think there's a lot of the country that has not seen Devon Dampier play. Yeah. And that's fair. You know, New Mexico was not exactly a headliner, but they did go into Auburn, and Devon Dampier had himself a pretty darn good game against the Tigers, and he was a very, very coveted transfer portal recruit, however, like free agent. Can we just call him a free agent?
He's basically in the modern era of college football.
He's a highly coveted transfer portal agent, or it's a guy, transfer guy, dude. All my bumbling aside, I think, to your point, there are a lot of people who have not seen Devon Dampier play in his fullness, right? They haven't seen the explosiveness, the ability to run, the pass. You look at the numbers, and the numbers do not tell the full story of what he was able to do at New Mexico. He did not have a lot around him. The offensive line was very subpar. There were some mistakes that he made. You got to be a little more consistent, got to protect the ball a little bit more. But as I pointed out when I was talking to some people on Twitter when he initially transferred, like unless you watched the games, the stats would not jump out at you because there were times where he made plays and had to force balls that he wouldn't have otherwise had to do if it was a team that was competing from in front or had the right kind of person around him. Like what he did to elevate that program speaks volumes to me. I watched a lot of his games, watch him play. He's really an impressive player. So all that to say is he may be undervalued. That's okay. The room is clearly valued properly. I think a lot of that is because you have 4-star Isaac Wilson. You have You mentioned Nate Johnson. I think that's exactly what Utah wants you to think is we don't know where he's going to play. Nope, you don't. And you're not going to know until the very first snap and maybe not even until the last snap. So, this is like Kyle Willingham just try and figure me out. He loves to play that game of just you never know. You're going to have to prepare for everything. So, all that being said, I think the value of the room is right where it needs to be there at 23. If I'm looking at a medium member, that makes a lot of sense, because I think it's a team in a program that's probably top 25, top 20. I think Devon Dampier should be higher. That being said, this is a quarterback-heavy year. There's a lot of really good quarterbacks in college football. So I can understand why not everybody thinks the same as us, right?
Yes.
Or is looking at it the same. So from a fan perspective, I got to feel a little comfortable, especially with the way things things went last year. Like, okay, that's pretty good. Maybe a little disrespected because I think there's a lot of fans out there that are ready to start their Devon Dampier Heisman campaigns. Fine with that. Do it. I'm not saying he's going to win it, but let's get hype trains going. Might as well. I think from the football program, I think they probably feel really comfortable about the room as well.
I think they do. And I still have concerns about the backup, but I do feel like overall this is a group that feels we go.
What concerns with the backup?
If they get in, I don't know if you can win games with them just like last year. I just saw from Isaac Wilson. I don't know if he's going to for sure make that sophomore jump. I think it's asking a lot of Bird Ficklin. Zerbrug that's the same thing, just hasn't played a lot of college football. There's not a veteran backup on this roster. I would feel better if there was, knowing it's hard to get a veteran back.
Sure. I think you can get through 2 or 3 games pretty effectively with whoever your backup is. I think the bigger
How confident are you in Isaac Wilson making a sophomore leap? That's what this comes down to me.
After spring, I'd say 60-40.
Okay. That's not great, but
it's not. But I also think
that's something.
The big thing with Isaac is he knows, he's aware of what he needs to work on. And he's aware. I think the hard part is that he's transitioning into a new system, and so there's some rocky stuff in spring. But they also coached the heck out of him, man, and he responded, and I really respect that. The other thing with Isaac too is there's a lot of natural talent and ability there. What I do think to me that speaks volumes about this whole situation is I think that Utah has a better system and better athletes around the quarterback right now that can contribute if somebody goes down. So if you lose a Devon Dampier for the season, I feel like you can pivot to a different style of play that's going to allow your offense to still be functional. That's not going to be so dependent upon one single quarterback. So that's where I have more confidence.
That's a great point, and that's what Andy Ludwig has, and that's what Andy Ludwig failed to do. I think some of the revisionist history with Andy Ludwig, people are always a bad offensive coordinator. It's like, well, we won 2 Pac-12 championships. What are we talking about? But look, the game changes, it evolves. There's a reason that a lot of coaches, after their great quarterback retires, in the NFL or wherever, they don't always have a ton of success after. College can be a little different. You have the Nick Sabans of the world, but even that he's done it with different offensive coordinators. So I don't love some of the revisionist history with Ludwig. We can do that on another show. But Jason,
Andy Ludwig was also the offensive coordinator when Utah went undefeated. So
exactly,
I've got plenty of accolades. Let's. I get it. He's not. They're not going 100% on third down. You got me on that one. You nailed me, fans. Gotcha. Yeah, but I think some of that too is just that, in the heat and the emotion of the moment, fans. We have always tried on this show, and in my previous stints, doing media work, all I always tried to do was educate fans so that when they looked at something like a 45% third down conversion, they realized after the fact, hey, that's actually pretty good, right?
Yes.
Or this is actually pretty good. That's pretty good. And so when you look for things that you can see, even if the result isn't what you want to see this progression, right? And I think that to me is where I think Utah as fans is much more evolved than most programs.
Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are here. The finals have been just electric, right? Every single game between the Thunder and the Pacers. I know it always hasn't come down to the wire, but man, it's just always great to see the 2 best teams in the league go at it. And if you want to get in on and just see what's the action like you feel in a certain way about a read, you need to head over to FanDuel. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Plus, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments, and how could tracking their trends help you build your next bet? That's what FanDuel has. You could bet $5, and if it hits, you get $200. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Once again, head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And earlier you mentioned the skill position talent around. We're going to get to that, but let's get to the highest ranked position group Utah has, offense or defense. It's offensive line. I would have guessed that coming into this. They're seventh. I think that's incredibly fair. I like it. I mean, could they be in the top 5? Sure. I just feel like I feel like once again, like how's everyone feel about this? Fans will probably feel it's a little low. I'm sure there's some fans that'll feel like Utah is a top 5 offensive line. Some probably think they have the best offensive line in the nation. Media should probably feel like this is fair. Like I just feel like most people are like, hey, they have 2 first-round offensive tackles. They should feel good about this. So how do I feel about this ranking? I think it's fair. I've talked about it a lot. I just have, based on what we did last year.
Speak from your heart, JT. How do you really feel?
I watched every game last year, and we've been doing this a lot with some of these guys now, and I just don't like Jaron Kump, Tongai, Mokafisi. Like Mokafisi's been good, but can he take the next step to Jaron Kump? Can he take the next step? I did not think he was great last year. Tongai, another guy, didn't think he was great last year. Tackles are awesome, but how's the run game going to be if your interior offensive line can't set up? So could this be a group that is a top 10 offensive line in college football? Absolutely. But I feel like the reason I hear a lot of people why they love this offensive line is all 5 starters are back. Bryan Brown, you and I were talking about before the show. Which team was everyone saying that about last year? It was Oklahoma State. Good job listening. That's right. So we do Oklahoma State, and they were awful last year. So I'm not saying it's going to be Utah, but I'm just saying just because you get all 5 guys back doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be ballers. How do you view this offensive line room?
Potentially to be great. I think that's where I really look at it from, and I think that's what this ranking is indicative. I think if you're a fan, you're probably a little frustrated. Like Spencer Fano has basically spent the offseason being touted as the best tackle prospect in college football. Only to have some people counter with, like, it's actually not Spencer Fano, it's Caleb Lomu. And so if you're a fan, you're thinking, like, wow, we should be really up there. Now let's take a look at the teams that are in front of them. Penn State, Clemson, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Florida, Miami. Okay? Miami has one of the best offensive line coaches in college football there. Did a great job. Francis Mayoga, I can't pronounce his last name. I apologize.
You got a better shot of it than me.
He was a preseason All-American as well. Blake Miller for Clemson is another one of the preseason All-Americans. Spencer Fano made first team for Utah in Phil Steele's magazine. So, like, you're looking at some of these other units. Like Notre Dame has had, like Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line. Same with, some of these other groups. Texas A&M has a really good one. All 5 starters returning. Clemson has 4 starters returning. Penn State has 4 starters returning. So you look at that, like it's pretty clear what the baseline was in the ranking. It's returning starters. So you've got some really good units there. If I'm a fan, I'm probably looking at all those and thinking, Utah's just good. If I'm looking as a media member, I'm like, wow, this is actually really impressive that Utah's up in this group. Like you're ahead of Iowa, Alabama, Oregon, Boise State, Auburn, Ohio State, Texas Tech, and SMU in the top 15. Right. Mm-hmm. Also, if we're looking at it as a fan, I'm looking for where BYU is at. BYU is at 53. So I'm real stoked on that part of it. Right. Is this group really the 7th best group in college football? Not right now. Do I think they have that potential? Yes. Do I think that Jim Harding is the guy to get him there? 100% absolutely.
That's a great point. Absolutely trust the coaching. And this is a group I think can be really good. But also, just go back to last week. I had questions going into the season. How's Jaron Kump going to do at center? It wasn't smooth sailing when he started there 2 years ago always. And there were growing pains last year. It wasn't just because people were crowding the box was the reason Utah had running game issues. That wasn't the only reason. But these guys are capable of getting better. And I do think just another year at the position of the year 3 now for Jaron Kump at this spot, right? So I do think he's capable of having a good year. What are we going to add?
I agree, and I would also say that I think the adjustments in the scheme will help the offensive line. You're not just going to be going inside zone every single play from under center where everybody knows what's coming, number 1, number 2. I do think, what we saw in the spring game where basically the second string offensive line dominated, maybe I'm being a little loose with the term dominated, but I do think that seeing that unit do so well and knowing that none of the starters played and you're like, whoa, okay. This is good, right? This means that there's a lot of competition in the room, a lot of depth. I'm super high on Isaiah Garcia. I think there's a potential, like, if something does happen at the center position, I think there's potential for him to slide down and play in that if necessary. I do think we're going to see him get some rotation at the guard position along with some other guys. There's just that much depth in the group to where I think you're going to see a lot of guys get reps, and especially early on. So I think, again, the potential for this group is really ceiling. 7th is 100% where it should be. Will it actually go through? I think that's obviously what we're going to play the games for.
We were talking about Oklahoma State earlier. Ollie Gordon was supposed to win the Heisman last year. So it's one thing on paper to do this, and it's another thing when it plays out entirely differently. But yes, this offensive line is good. Should be Utah's highest ranked position, in my opinion, too. I'm curious to see if they'll meet the mark and how everything shakes out there. So let's actually bounce from one of the highest ranked position to a position group that I was shocked at how low they were. Utah's running backs are 57th. I think I think the local media will feel like that's too low. I think everyone will think that's too low. I'm sorry. I think Wayshawn Parker is going to be a star. Like, he had 700 yards as a freshman last year. He's behind this offensive line. I get it. Naquari Rogers doesn't like light up the excitement. He's not a household name or anything even close to that. But I really think Parker's going to be a stud. I think Rogers is a really good complimentary back. You get the Devin Greens of the world. Like, there's a lot to like in this room. Are they a top 20 group? Probably not. I think they are I think by the time the year is done, they will be a top 40 group, especially because of Wayshawn Parker. I think he's going to have a chance. I expect him to be a top 30 back in college football. I think he's going to be a star. I think he's going to break out behind this offensive line. I love what I saw from him as a freshman. This, to me, is the most surprising ranking that Utah has on this list, and I think they're going to shatter it by the time the season is done, Brian.
I would agree. I think as a unit, what Utah has going is really special in there. I think you're probably going to see some reps where Nate Johnson takes a few handoffs at running back. We mentioned Daniel Bray in the previous podcast. I forgot to mention Racing Guillory, who I actually think is a good name in terms of, like, he has some real explosion. He's a really, like, fast back, could provide you with a lot of change of pace type hitting plays. So I think there's a lot of potential in that regard for this group to really take a step forward. And so saying that, that's part of why I understand why Phil Steele ranked him the way that where he did. Seeing BYU at 53 ahead of Utah is really head-scratching for me if I'm a Utah fan, because I don't think BYU returns anything that was super outstanding at running back. Neither does Utah. I get it, but you're, like you pointed out, you're getting Wayshawn Parker in as a transfer. That should mean a lot, right? He was one of the most coveted guys in the transfer portal market. And so, seeing programs like, in conference foes like Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas State, seeing Arizona State at 28 after losing Scadaboo, that really gives me kind of a head scratcher there. And
yeah, I know they got the Army back, I think, transferred there, but I totally agree.
Which is fine, but, like, I mean, you still don't know, right? And I think, for what Utah does, for who they are, how they, like, the offensive system, Jason Beck is an offensive coordinator. I do think that there could have been a little bit more respect paid. That being said, how do you, how as a fan, as a media member, I can campaign for that. Does Phil still really care about what we all think as fans? Probably not. He's got way more information from all the other teams out there. But I do see a lot of teams that lost running backs. Like Virginia Tech is ahead of Utah, Arkansas is ahead of Utah. So all these teams that lost running backs that had impact on their program being higher, and so it does kind of give me some puzzlement, I guess, is the word that I'm going to make up here. So befuddled.
Very. I mean, look at the offense. If you look at the running back rankings, like, Utah's crazy low on Phil Steele's list. And Wayshawn Parker noticed. Someone added him. They Do is the name of the app that added him. And he said, Parker and Atuaya, time to stand on business. And he responded, it's all we do. Go Utes. Yep. That's the type of response I love. Like, this is the offseason. Like, give us the bulletin board material if I'm these guys at this point, right? Like, that's exactly what this stuff is. People are doubting you. Like, a lot of Utah fans, unless you listen to Locked On Utes and some of these other Utah podcasts, right? Like, you may not know Wayshawn Parker's name. Maybe you do, and you kept up with the transfer portal editions, but it's going to be a name you're going to know very soon. I'm really excited to see the season he's going to have. But this is not the lowest position group that Utah has. That distinction, unfortunately, belongs to the wide receivers. They're ranked 75th. That's really low. I got to be honest. I totally get it on this one. I think it's fair. I think it's totally fine. I think the media will probably say it's fair. I think the media will say it's fair. I think fans might say, oh, we could be a little better, but based on our history, and honestly, I didn't love what I saw in the spring game. Could Tobias Merriweather be good? I think there's definitely a chance he could be. There's a massive problem. He hasn't been able to put it together anywhere else he's been quite yet. Injuries play a role in that, but also inconsistencies have too. If you look at what other writers have said about his game at times before in those spots. So Otto Tia, I didn't love in the spring game. Try not to overreact to one thing, but some guys make the jump from G5 to P4, and it doesn't always go as great as you hope. You love it. Oh, we got this guy. He's going to be our number one receiver. It doesn't always work that way. So I like Ryan Davis. I like Creed Whitmore. I think there's a lot of guys in this room that can do something. Also, tight ends isn't on this list, but look, I haven't seen Hunter Andrews outside of a spring game. Like I want to see it. Can he be that guy? I didn't love what I saw last year from the tight end who's escaping me. He went to Snow College. His name's Dallin Bentley. Always love what I saw from Dallin Bentley too. So I'm good with 75. I feel like some won't, but I feel like the consensus will probably be, yeah, this is fair. For all of college football, a program not known for their wide receivers, I'm good with this.
Yeah, I think the biggest reaction from fans is we're interpreting this on their behalf is, should I be worried? Because I am worried. And I kind of do feel like, yeah, you should be a little worried. You know, you mentioned a lot of these guys, Merriweather, Autotia, guys who have a lot of potential but have not shown it. And so what is it going to take for those guys to show that potential as they stop in at Utah? You know, to say that Micah Simon has his work cut out for him might be a little bit of an understatement. He is definitely earning his paycheck this year. Now, if ever you're going to go after a guy who's going to work and grind and really push his guys to be better, it's Micah Simon. So you're in a good space in that regard. But Utah really is, I don't want to say in trouble, but they are playing from behind at the wide receiver position. And you don't see a ton of explosion. You can say what you want about Creed Whittemore. You know, he's a good cultivating receiver, meaning he can get you a few yards, he can get a drive started. I don't think he has that explosiveness to really break out and bust a big play open. The one guy who seemed to have that in spades is now gone, headed to a former rival at USC. So, you know, that's Vidania, you know, farewell, so long, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. But in terms of Utah, it's going to have to come from internal development at this point. You have what you have, right? So it's either maybe you find some guys in the offseason that you think like, hey, we can afford to move this guy from corner to wide receiver. Maybe it's going to come into development in terms of how you're using your running backs in the passing game. You know, the Nate Johnson question looms over all this because if Nate Johnson really does develop as a wide receiver, now all of a sudden that room has a legit threat in my mind, you know, has a legit athlete who can make some game-breaking plays that we've seen, you know, do that in Rice-Eccles Stadium, no less. So it is very contingent upon a lot of things. And I think when you have a room like that is so important nowadays that Utah has seemingly never been able to overcome, it does bring a lot of concern and anxiety if I'm a fan. And as a media member, I want to be clear. I'm not saying like me media member, but like, you know, if I'm a media person, sure, whatever. I mean, I guess these days anybody who talks into a microphone can be considered media. But in my past, if I were hosting a radio show or something like that, my whole agenda would be like, hey, like, let's talk about this so that when it happens and it doesn't look good, people are aware, right? And so your expectations are low. And you know, so I think in that regards, it's got to hurt too if you're a Utah fan and you see 75th and BYU's at 32. Like it's just it is a lot to take in, especially where you're starting up a new offense, which basically is counter from what you've had all along, which was tight end centric. You know, and TEU was such a big part of Utah's identity for so long, and now you just have Dallin Bentley, Drew Clemens, and Hunter Andrews, and even Hunter Andrews, like not a true tight end. You know, he's going to be more of a U. They call it a U back. Colloquial terms, H back. So there are people there. There are players available. How you use that personnel is going to be up to Jason Beck and the rest of his staff to maximize it. And I think if you're a Utah fan, like the one glimmer of absolute hope that you have is that the guy throwing the ball is going to be one of the best in the country.
Oh, you just took it. That was exactly where I was going to go. You read my mind. I was going to say, he can buy the time. Like, that's something that helps. If your receivers don't get open right away, hey, you got time to scramble, make something happen because these dudes aren't going to be able to tackle me. We talked about earlier what Devon Dampier did against Auburn. Like, he had these games against Arizona too. Like, his touchdown interception ratio was 3-3. Like, he's a guy who still showed he belonged on the field with those guys. He's got to cut down the turnovers, but I feel like he's capable of big things. So we covered a lot with the position rankings there offensively. Shout out to Phil Steele, man. We appreciate him going through, putting all these rankings together. It's a gauntlet. I mean, this is just one. We just did this just for Utah, and it's taken up 2 episodes. Like, I can't even imagine just having to do this for the whole thing. So shout out to Phil, all the guys who helped put this together too. We appreciate the list. And once again, you can head over and check it out on his magazine, as well as Utah for Josh Furlong posted on his X account if you want to see where the rankings are once again too. Do have one more thing I want to hit on before we get out of here though, and that's high school football coaching in the state of Utah, because this is Utah. One of the reasons that Utah has become the brand they have, the collegiate brand they have, is because of how good the high school football talent in the state has been for so long. The guys who have flown under the radar, the Van Fillingers that Utah's been able to find, help recruit, develop, and have helped them win Pac-12 championships. So high school football coaches, at least in Georgia, are starting to earn their due. Georgia now has at least 100 high school coaches making $109,000 or more per a recent report. A decade ago, back in 2015, the state had only 17 coaches making at least six figures. I think it's awesome that Georgia's investing that much in their high school football coaches, in their teachers as well too. Utah, it's not that number. I don't think it'll ever be that high. Just Georgia is one of like the 3 to 4 states like that is high school football, like legit. They're up there with the Texas, the California, the Florida. But for me, Brian, I do want to see us continue to put into I want to see high school football coaches continue to be rewarded for what they do, not just as coaches, but leaders in young men's lives. They have shaped the Utah football program itself a lot because of the players they've helped develop at their level that Utah's then taken the next level. So I do hope we can continue to compensate them more in the future moving forward.
I'd agree 100%, and I think there are a few things to isolate within that. A lot of what has allowed those Georgia coaches to make more money is things like higher pay for master's degrees and things of that nature. If you have all the years of tenure that you can, so you've made through all the lanes, you have a PhD, you have every single possible, enticement that the state has to offer in the state of Utah, the most you can make as a teacher is $145,000 a year. So like that to me is very telling in the sense of just like teacher pay is lower. Not a political statement. I always believe in investing in your community, and that's why I've coached at the high school level previously. I can speak from experience. I know how much that stipend is. When I say like there was a year where I spent more in gas before the season even started than I made, quote unquote, when I got paid my stipend. It is you do it because you love it, and the guys who get into teaching, there are things like driver's ed stipends and other additions that you can be made to make it to where you can actually make ends meet. But I think the bigger issue that you're seeing with Georgia is they're investing specifically in football, because football means leaders. It is the people that are going to be leading your police departments, your fire departments. It is insane how many of my former players are firemen now. Like it's just,
That's cool.
It boggles my mind. One runs a Chili's, electricians, plumbers, like to see them. And it's so fun because we still have reunions with them and get together and see what they're doing. They work in a variety of fields. Several have gone into the military, and you think like all of these kids had this experience in our program where it made them better and has made them better contributors to the community. One thing that I'm super, super proud of is that the guys who lasted in our program have continued to grow and develop and become contributing members in their communities almost to a T. Like, I'm not going to say we were, zero misses. Things happen, life occurs, but far and away it is a much better result. And I'm comfortable in saying like the city of Salt Lake is better because some of those guys are out there doing those jobs. And that to me is why it's so important to take care of coaches. It's not about making them rich, right? Or making them, like empowering them to be jerks or anything like that. It's because they have more contact and more influence than anybody else on a lot of these guys in terms of where they're going to play in the future, the kind of counseling that they're getting. And so why wouldn't you want to invest that money in your future? Like, do you want a doctor that was, like coached by 6 different dudes and most of them were unpaid and most of them were showing up half the time? Or do you want a doctor that was taught the right way to do things, that was pushed, that was held accountable, that was held responsible, that was taught the techniques and the the strategies of being a leader or being successful from someone who's devoted to their entire life to how that works and how that operates? I think even as a non-coach, and I am rambling a little bit, I apologize to everybody out there listening.
No, keep going. You're doing great.
Even as a non-coach, like I'm still obsessed with performance. What makes great performance? What are the key indicators? How can I be a great performer and all those kinds of things? It's just one of those mindsets that stayed with me no matter what I've done. And a lot of that is because of coaching. And so I think it's something where you're not just investing. The state of Utah has a tremendous resource right now with its football, not just for the University of Utah, but at the high school level and across the country. And right now it is an arms race. It is an arms race in the scope of college athletics. Why are we not investing deeper in making sure that our local athletic programs, our feeder programs, are the best that they possibly can be, and are taking that talent, maximizing it, and sending it on to the University of Utah so that we can be one of those great programs? It's clearly working for Georgia. Georgia and Tech are top of the charts, right? So like maybe, and you're seeing this battle happen in Florida right now. We all want to invest in a 401k. you know, like this is one of those moments where it's like, you know, we all want to invest in the future so that when we get to that point, we feel comfortable. Invest now in your future so that when you need a doctor, when you need a lawyer, when you need a firefighter to help you out, the best of the best are coming from Utah.
1000% agree. We've talked to a long time now about all the different things we hit on. That was the most important thing we said so far today. So thank you so much, man. Points that you make like that are so important. It's the bigger picture. It's why I'm lucky to have you as a guest on this show. It's why everyone was lucky when you were hosting the show, because you do an incredible job breaking it down. So thank you so much for staying that. Love you a lot, man. And really appreciate making the time to come on and join me for this two-parter.
Yeah, I appreciate you. And I want to finish with one thing. Like, I don't say this to, you know, to puff myself up. I advocate for those coaches because I know those men. And no one puts more time and energy and love into your sons and daughters than those high school coaches. I promise you, outside of their parents, you know, and so that's why we stand up on this platform. We say what we say because we know how important they are. That being said, I always appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk with you. The conversation is far and away more my pleasure than anyone else's. And I really love and appreciate everything that you do, not just for the Utah football community and the Locked On Utes community, but for everybody. Because I've experienced your attitude and your kindness and your grace up close and personal. So a little bit of hey, we're guys. It's Men's Mental Health Month. We're gonna share some love a little bit.
We are going to share some love. I love and appreciate all that, and love and appreciate you so much, man. And love and appreciate all of you. I mean, seriously, for taking the time to listen to this fun two-parter. We broke down both sides of the ball at this point now. So let us know in the comments what you guys think about each position group as well. That is going to do it for this Locked On Utes. We'll continue to have more content coming your way in the near future, but that's going to do it for our show today.